Good morning. This is the Blaine's World webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You get more information about this show and past shows at my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my two guests today, and they are Stephen Samuels and Alex McDonald Villarreal. I think I got it, Alex. And
Yeah, you got it.
Steve already got the message, but you can wave to all your friends and fans who are watching this, Alex. So that's Alex. I should mention that these two guys are two of the most talented theater folks in the area that I know of, and they're currently involved in a play. But before we talk about the play itself, what I like doing, Alex, the first time I meet somebody on the air, is just get a little bit about your background. And so the question I always ask is, as a kid, you grew up where?
I grew up in Dallas, Texas.
Okay, when you were growing up in Dallas, Texas, did you always know you want to be a theater guy?
Pretty much. I think as a kid, I was always doing impersonations of family members. And then by the time I was like 8 years old, I started getting involved with theater at school, and that was my favorite elective. And then by the time I was 10, I was taking classes at the Dallas Theater Center.
Do you remember the first play you were ever in?
The very first play that I can remember was in kindergarten. And we did the birth of Christ. I was one of the shepherds that shows up to the birth of Christ because I went to a private Catholic school. So I even had like a robe made, my family helped make, and then the staff and the whole thing. But that was the very first play that I can remember. And
Well,
then, but like a play like with actual speaking lines or like characters. Um, I want to say it was probably I was in fifth grade and I played Cinderella's cat and like a kid's version of Cinderella. And I had like a big floofy headpiece. I was Attila the cat. What a great name.
well, I want you to remember that, Steve, because an idea I've shared with you in the past is for a fundraiser for your theatrical group. I contend we should have everybody do their very first role they ever did as a kid. You know,
Well, then we'd have two cats. I
well,
mean, it'd be terrible. We'd be like this with each other. It'd be awful, just awful.
what, were you a cat also?
Yes.
Oh, were you really? But can you imagine that? Wouldn't that be a
No, I
great?
can't.
No, but
And I keep telling you I can't.
okay, but I mean,
But you keep insisting. So yeah.
well, I can. And I'll even help with it. I'll even be a sponsor for it. But I just think, Alex, that'd be a great thing that everybody would do their very first role. Because like you said you did this when you were young. Do you have a videotape of that somewhere?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I have to search my grandpa's house because he had like videos on videos on videos of so many different things. But I bet you that kindergarten one is on tape. I'm pretty sure I've seen that.
But just in
Mm.
case it's not, we'll redo it again. So you went from kindergarten. Did you then continue studying theater and acting?
Oh yes. I went to the Arts Magnet High School in Dallas, Texas, in downtown Dallas. It's called Booker T. Washington High School for the Performing and Visual Arts. So half my day was regular high school classes, and the other half of my day was my theater cluster. And it's split into four clusters. You got music, art, like visual art, dance, and theater. And I was in the theater. Um, and then from there, I went to Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas, and I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting and theater. Um, and then I did an acting internship at PCPA Theater Fest at the Pacific Conservatory of the Performing Arts in Santa Maria, California, where I learned how to be in musicals. That was intense because they were all like Broadway caliber actors, and I was like, I am in way over my head.
Yes.
but but there were directing interns and music interns who helped me so I bombed my first audition there for White Christmas. I tried to sing a song from Newsies and couldn't keep up with the accompanist. And then, 3, 4 months later, I've been working with the directing intern and the accompanist, who's the musical assistant director, and they helped me develop an audition for Les Mis, and I got cast in the ensemble. and they said it was like night and day for my first audition to that one. So you take that and you learn. And then I moved back to Texas after my contract was up, and I moved to Austin, Texas, and I lived there for several years until I got a job with Bright Star Touring Theater here in Asheville,
Oh,
and that's when I came up here. I had a friend who was a part of the tour. He got cast, I think, through UPTA's, the Unified Professional Theater auditions in Memphis, and someone on another tour had to drop, so he sent me a text, and it was like the day after I did his farewell party. And I was like, "What'd you forget?" And he was like, "No, I'm already there. They just need another actor. Do you want to come and tour for a couple months?" And I was like, "Sure." So, and
That's
then I fell in love with Asheville. I did another tour with them the following year, and then I was like, at that point, I had no bills. I had planned that tour, so it wasn't a surprise. So I had no rent, no bills, no nothing, and I saved up all my money from the tour and was able to rent a little tiny one um, like on the downtown side of the tunnel off MLK. And back then, it was like 590 a month, and it was great. And it's like you can't find anything like that anymore. But that's how I moved here.
so two thoughts,
wow.
Alex, of no particular significance. One, keep this in mind next time you have to audition. But my one, whenever I do auditions, and I don't act, I don't sing, but I do tequila. So that's the one thing I can do. And it's the one line I can remember one line. I'm good for that. Also, I'm trying to think, in the Asheville area, have I seen you in musicals? I've seen you in a bunch of stuff, but I've seen you in musicals.
No, I have not done musicals really since. I've had to carry a tune here and there, but I haven't really done any musicals in town. But I do hear what they want to do in the Heights next year. So that's something I'm definitely interested in.
Ooh, great
Okay.
show.
Looking forward to it. And Steve, the same thing too, even though I've had you as a guest, I think this is what, the 23rd or 24th time you've been a guest, or
700, 800 times.
at least. But Steve, if you can, kind of your Reader's Digest background of how you got into theater. And I didn't know that you had been a cat as a kid, or you
Yes, I've told you this 5 or 6 times,
well,
but
but Alex never heard the story, and we'll
oh, very
watch it.
exciting story. Kindergarten, whatever that story is, where is that the hen who wants to bake some bread and nobody wants to help, but in the end they all want to eat the bread and
Oh yeah.
no, you can't have it because you didn't help. Yeah, I was a cat. I was embarrassed, and that's the end of that. I don't remember ever thinking about the theater. I sort of followed my older brother. I just did things that he did, except sports. I was not. I mean, at first I was good at sports, but then not so much. I started doing shows really in school, mostly musicals, summer camp, junior high. Um, and people responded well to me, so I kind of liked that, and I just kept doing it. And I guess by the time I got to high school, I knew that I was pretty thoroughly devoted. And before I left high school, I had started writing and directing as well as acting, and I pursued that in college. And after college, I ended up in London for a little bit and almost got cast on a BBC radio program until the guy who was in charge of it realized I was American, not Canadian. So there was no way for me to get a work permit. I have this terrible habit of co-founding theater companies. Had a little traveling rural troupe with old friends from Bennington College up in rural New York State and Vermont, cow country as it really is. Um, just traveling around, it was kind of wild. After that, I went back to grad school at Brown University, and even though it wasn't in the program, I managed in my senior year to let me put on shows in New York City, and I ended up at the Ridiculous Theatrical Company, which was really my major grounding in professional theater and helped bring Charles Ludlam's magnificent comic troupe from utter obscurity and very small audiences to a more or less worldwide audience and national renown. Followed that up with a long stint at Theater Communications Group, where I was the senior editor of the book division. The first play I discovered on my desk one day, something that hadn't really been produced yet, at least the second part. was called Angels in America, this tiny little play that I authorized the publication of, and had an extraordinary experience there, working with everyone from Stephen Sondheim to Paula Vogel and Susan Lloyd Parks. So very many of the most important American playwrights of the 1990s. Went from there to Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., one of the major theater companies in the country, and was the artistic associate there for a couple of years, specializing, as I always do, in original works for the stage. And then I sort of Peter Principled myself right out of it. I had always loved the work that I did when I was doing my own stuff, of course, and my friend's stuff. I totally believed in it. When I was with the Ridiculous Theatrical Company, I believed in everything. When I was with Theater Communications Group, I believed in about 90% of what we did, but I got 100% of what I wanted. So that was pretty good. At Arena Stage, it became more difficult. There, if I cared about two of the 8 main stage plays we did a year, that was a triumph, and it was hard for me. I had to shill for shows I really didn't believe in. I have very particular tastes. That I think they're wide ranging, but they do tend to focus on the creation of work, and that's hard. That's hard anywhere because audiences tend first they want to see musicals. That's the biggest thing. Uh, the audience for straight plays, as you if you will, is much smaller, and the number of people who are willing to take a risk on a new play, something that hasn't been reviewed, something that they don't otherwise really know anything about. Obviously, that's a very small percentage of the theater going public, which is a very small percentage of the population. So I was discouraged. I thought I was caught in a variety of traps. I was working at a fairly high level in the professional theater. I had a surprisingly good run and a certain amount of professional respect around the country, but I wasn't going to be able to prosecute what I wanted to do in the traps of subscription theaters and really giving audiences what they already know about, whereas I like to help expand ideas. So I kind of walked away for, I don't know, 8, 9 years. And when I moved to Asheville, I didn't know there was theater here, and I didn't care. And if I had known, I might not have moved here because I was truly done. I was totally done. And then, very much against my will, I was introduced to people who not only wanted to do theater, but much to my shock and amazement, wanted to do original plays developed locally. And then they built a theater, the Magnetic Theater, that I was the artistic director of for 8 years. And that was quite something. Subsequently, that company kind of exploded, as many small groups do after a certain period of time, and half the company left with me, and we founded the Sublime. And the Sublime has had an interesting but difficult road, partially because, I don't know, there was a pandemic a year and a half after we got started, and then something that affected our current show, Death Comes to Play, a high stakes comic gothic. Um, we were going to put that up last fall. It was going to open October 3rd. And I don't know, wind started blowing, trees fell down, places flooded, so I keep finding myself in the position of starting again. And every time you start again, nobody remembers you. I feel like all that work that we did at the Magnetic, which, really had a very significant audience, I don't know that there are that many people around who remember any of it. And I don't know that any of it carries over. Well, of course you do, Blaine. You're one of the rare people who really loves the theater, and you go to pretty much everything. And you've been a tremendous supporter, and it's really lovely. And if I had even 200 people like you, we could make a real go of it. But it's difficult, and I understand that, and I this is not a situation that's specific to Asheville. Ever since the pandemic, Many theaters around the country have had a very hard time coming back. Of course, there are always shows that do very well. Once again, they tend to be musicals. I have nothing against musicals. I just really like plays, and
Stephen, I was going to
they
ask
just push
you,
at other things as well.
I'm trying to think of all the stuff I've seen that you've done or been involved in. Have you ever been involved with a musical or done a musical?
Yeah, we I was very proud of a musical called MILF
Oh, that's
that
right.
was written by Lucia Del Vecchio that I got to direct, and yeah, we had a great time with it. And if some local people brought a musical that they were working on to my attention, there's a real chance I'd be interested in it. I'm not against it, but hard as it is, difficult as it is to develop plays, musicals, that's those take forever to make right. And but I would do it. Of course I would do it. I just don't remember the last time anyone even suggested one to me.
And I don't know if Alex got to see MILF, but were you here, Alex, when they did MILF? Or probably before your
I don't
time?
remember being able to see it. Like for several years, I was like working nights in restaurants like all weekend and things like that. So I never got a chance to get out for like years at a time. I was doing shows like 3 years apart.
But yeah,
Yeah, I had seen Alex, and I just could never get him to be in a play because of his work schedule.
so this is the first time you,
Then I got lucky. His work schedule changed, and we were able to do Travis Lowe's some notes on dating during outbreak, which was absolutely fantastic. And oh my God, I loved working with this guy.
well, yeah, I can see why, because Alex is just so much fun to watch. I mean, he has such a wide range of expressions, and I think you show them all, Alex, and the current show is just great. And I didn't know, and we'll talk about the current show in a second here, but I didn't know you also a famous games player. You're such a big fan of games, and you got Steve to become.
No. There's
No,
a little confusion here.
I think that was Scott. I think
Yeah,
technically that was Scott who's the big gamer.
yeah.
No,
In what would have been this show when I developed it originally last summer, last summer, Scott Fisher, whom I've
okay,
also worked with many times, including in our occasional how-to series of comedies. Um, Scott was in this role originally, and he's the big gamer. He inspired me, and in fact, a central part of this show is a game called Splinth,
right.
which Scott actually invented, and which was first featured in a how-to called Games and How to Play Them. I think that's what it was. Um, or did we get around to doing that one? I can't even remember. But there was a show that we did that featured Splinth, and I asked him if I could repurpose some of that material, and he was very generous, not only to allow me to do that then, but when he decided to do another show this spring. He didn't have any problem with us continuing to use some of that material. He's in Into the Woods right now,
Just going to say,
which
I,
he haven't had a chance to see yet. I'm going on the closing afternoon, but everyone tells me that show at Asheville Community Theater is fantastic. Our dear friend Dwight directed it and also has done a fantastic job. And people tell me that Scott, who plays the narrator, is just top notch, and I'm
Yeah,
not
he's
surprised in the
fantastic. It was
Alex,
like a dream role for him to be in that show and to see him in it, man, he nails it and he's so
he
great
did.
and hilarious. There's
And
all of them. Everyone in that show is great and hilarious. Like it's
and
wonderful.
not only was he good in it, he has two roles in it, which always amazes me when people do two roles in a play, sometimes three or more. But also kudos to Dwight, who not only directed it, but the day I
yeah.
saw it just the other day, somebody's out, so he had to take that role.
Well,
So
he's such a great performer.
but I don't know, Alex, were you there that day? But all of a sudden, with no notice, he came in and killed the role. Just amazing that he was the mother. It's just amazing on no notice he hit the role. But anyway, back to
Well, at
the
least he'd worked on the show. He was probably, as the director, he
well,
might have been a
director.
little familiar with it.
Well, let me ask you that, Stephen, and you do that oftentimes. But have you ever had to do that? Been directing a show or written it, and then have to step in at the last minute?
Nope. Been
No.
very fortunate.
Yeah, because
Haven't had to do that.
because
I
that
keep putting myself in shows, but but
Yeah.
I usually get to rehearse them first.
Okay, but I was so impressed that the guys can do that on like no notice and step in and Dwight killed it. So let's go to the current show then. So you wrote, and one of the things that amazes me about you, Stephen, is that you not only write plays, but you direct them. Sometimes you're in them as well. Um, Current play, name of it again is
Death Comes to Play. It's
okay.
a high stakes comic gothic.
Okay. And what how'd you come up with the idea for that?
I have absolutely no idea. I'll tell you what. I tell you, I come from a tradition where you make plays because you have to. If I were just left alone, sitting in my room, and I did not have a production scheduled, if I did not know that the play I was writing was going to go on a stage at such and such a date, I don't know that I'd get it done. Then I could just tinker with them forever. And, yeah, I respond very well to pressure. This is something I learned working very closely with Charles Ludlam at the Ridiculous Theatrical Company. There were times we would produce his plays while he was writing them. He was the only playwright, and the basic way it worked was we'd put up a new play, we'd run it as long as we could run it, and when we couldn't afford to run it anymore, we'd need a new play because we had to fill a theater. So he just started writing a play, and there were times when we would have a play cast and we would have started working on the costumes and the sets and the props and everything else involved. And he would run in with 2 pages and go, "It's finished." No, it wasn't finished, but we would work on those plays. Now, in this particular, and I did that with the Magnetic because I believe that the uh, process of developing plays, not only in the United States, really worldwide, but it's really endemic in the United States, is often very damaging to the one thing that theater really has to offer over other media, which is immediacy. You can make a play and put it up now. If you're talking about a movie or a television show, you're usually looking at years and years and years of development. And that's what's happened for plays in the American theater. But I come from the off Broadway world. I come from make it today and put it up tomorrow. So I wanted to try and recreate something like that, and that was what was happening at the Magnetic Theater, where I had a couple of playwrights besides myself to whom I was utterly dedicated. John Crutchfield, who's also an artistic associate with the Sublime, and Lucia Del Vecchio. And the basic arrangement with them was, if you write a play, we're going to put it up, even if I don't get it. If I will tell you what I think about your play, and if you agree with me and you do some rewrites, terrific. But if you believe in the play and I don't quite get it, then I want to produce it so that we all learn something. So either you'll find out that I was right, or what usually happens, I'll find out that the playwright was right. So I've always wanted to have a theater that was centered on what the playwrights were doing rather than drag them through the process of, here's a reading, now rewrite the play, here's another reading, here's a rehearsed reading, here's a staged reading. Oh, you don't remember why you wrote the play, you just kept rewriting it because that was what you thought you had to do to get the play produced. That doesn't work for me. I think the playwright should have primacy in this regard, if you know that you've got a terrific playwright. So let everybody learn, let everybody grow, let it happen in time. So I benefited from that because while I was running the Magnetic, I put up a new play pretty much every year. And often I was in a situation where I had scheduled the production, but I hadn't written the play yet. And then I had to write the play. And often that was a good way to go about it. I haven't had a play done in 8 years, in part because I was not in that situation. I didn't have a theater that had to be filled. I didn't have. Um, so this time around, what happened was I had booked a space. I had booked a block of time at the BB to do a show, and I thought I was going to find a play by another one of our playwrights, so let's say David Brendan Hopes or Travis Lowe or whomever, because there are a lot of interesting playwrights here. And I was coming up towards when we needed to really get serious about what we were going to produce, and I didn't have a script in hand that I felt very, very good about. So I realized I had to write a play.
When
And
did
this one, I will admit that I watch a lot of old movies. I watch a lot of everything, and I read a lot of everything. Uh, but I find an enormous amount of inspiration in films from Hollywood in the 1930s and the 1940s. And there's a marvelous film from the 30s based on an Italian play from earlier in the 20th century called Death Takes a Holiday. And it just struck me as such a curious notion that death has to take a break for some reason, a very short break, but the whole world is essentially upended because of that. That's pretty much all I took from the play and the film. And then I don't know what caused me to think about it may have come from the title. It may have come from, well, what would be a variant on the title. And I started thinking about maybe death needed a game night.
you have me
Just
thinking, by
needed
the way,
to take a break.
you have me
And
thinking,
that's I developed the play from that very, very, very simple concept. And I drafted and I thought about the actors I wanted and I invited them into the production, and then I stole aspects of their lives and my life and just concocted a totally, I'd say there's a real family story behind it, which, Alex plays my son in the play, and the family dynamic is really the heart of the thing, as well as all sorts of philosophical notions about death and the value of life. But in the end, the game playing is the key. And what I hope I've accomplished, and what people are telling me I've accomplished, is that I've managed to make this very silly, rather funny thing that makes it actually so easy to think about some of the deepest, darkest things in our lives that the audience is sort of not noticing that that's what we're doing, and yet they come away going, huh, that's kind of interesting.
Steve,
So
if I can, you have me thinking, by the way, first of all, about the movie. Who was in the movie? I remember the movie Death Takes a Holiday. Do you remember who was in it?
Frederick
you know
March.
Oh, Frederick.
Frederick March,
Why?
magnificent
Thank
actor.
you. Yeah, one of my favorite actors of all time. And now
Yeah,
I
me too.
know
I
why.
also stole from his Jekyll and Hyde for my When Jekyll
I
Met
remember it.
Hyde.
Right. But that was one of my favorite actors. And Alex, let me ask you then. So in terms of when you get a script, um, Stephen was talking about the fact that sometimes they change, at the last minute. How tough is that for you when you get a script and you have to change it as you're delivering it? You remember the part, and does it ever change for you in the middle of it as the play is being developed? Or this one, did it evolve?
Yes, I've worked on pieces that have evolved, especially like if they're locally written or whatever the case may be, as long as you have that elasticity, if you will, of like, okay, it's still in the same world. You're not changing it completely, but we're gonna fix this or do this or add this. I've been in those situations, and I think coming from like a background where I've done lots of children's theater, I've done lots of Shakespeare, things like that. So where it's very presentational and you have to kind of adapt to whatever audience you're with. Being able to do that, it's not really a struggle for me. It's something where it's like, okay, this is, you pivot and you go. That's just it. But I do know not everybody's like that. There's some people where it's like they can't pivot. It's like, no, I need to know everything up front. I can't be in a production that changes or anything like that, or that you're adding to or things. Some actors don't have that ability, but as
Or
Steve
interest.
knows, as much as I just randomly add without even thinking about it. It's unconscious. It's just like stuff comes out of my mouth or reactions happen on stage that are just that I play with because things are always evolving for me as an actor or the character in a production. And Steve, any director I've worked with will have to like tone it down. Some people embrace it. Yeah, go, 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 go. Now we're gonna stretch it all down, cut it all out, and this is where you're at. Good job. Now don't stop adding.
But that's not quite well, Adding, yeah, because if nothing else, in the midst of a performance, it can really throw other actors off a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit, especially in something that works like Death Comes to Play. It really is a kind of farce timing, and improvising significantly during the show can throw off the rhythm, can make that a little too complicated. But this was a very interesting situation for Alex. He came into a show that was scripted fully. Again, during its development period over the last summer, there were a lot of changes that happened to the writing because of what actors suggested might be helpful, or lines that they thought, well, yeah, but, and I was this may be I've done this a lot, but this may be the most collaborative experience I've had, where it's like I really had the inclination and the time, especially since I was drawing on so much of people's personalities to a certain extent, that I couldn't have been more open to, hey, yeah, there's a much better idea. Let's do it this way. That's fantastic. Why not? So it was interesting when I had to recast Scott's role, and again got really lucky that Alex, who's one of the busiest actors in town, was able to step into this. And yeah, it took him a little while to respond to the script, and then he went, "Yeah, I'll come play with you." It's exactly the kind of guy he is. And even though he was stepping into a role that existed, he's a totally different guy than Scott. And I was open. I mean, everything about his personality, the character's personality, is quite different. And in that process where Alex is just in rehearsal, letting things come out, whatever strikes him, I was encouraging about that, and lines got changed. There's one bit that showed up really very late in the process where he's naming some games, and it was a list of games that Scott had thought would be interesting, that happened to involve kittens exploding and death and all sorts of destruction. And it's like the last set of games that's being named, and all of a sudden, and I think this was in this last hellish week of putting the show up, um, he just went, exploding kittens, no. This, no, what, why did I say that? And I went, yeah, keep that. So yeah, it was, I mean, because it's so funny. And I don't,
And-
you know,
Go ahead.
I understand playwrights who feel proprietary about their authorship, but I remember going back to working with Tony Kushner on putting together the scripts for Angels in America and quite a few others. He wrote an afterword for Angels in America, where he talked about his master, in a certain sense, was Bertolt Brecht. And Brecht worked collaboratively. I mean, he didn't always credit people, especially the women, which is a little sad, but or very sad. But he really did. He liked to write in the midst of people, and he would grab things that were happening in conversation and put them straight into his script, or work with other people and develop them. And Tony has been very much like that at various times in his career as a writer. And when he succeeded so well with Angels and he wrote an afterword, he really wanted to make that clear. And I don't know that I've ever seen any playwright talk about it in this way before, but he said playwrights do not do this stuff by themselves. And I think that's glorious. So, I credit Olivia Stuller, who plays in this show. I credit Laura Tratnik. I credit Scott. I credit Alex. I mean, sure, my idea, my structure, pretty much my dialogue, but I was very influenced by what they brought to bear, and they made it a much better play.
And as you're talking, I can just see because one of the things I liked so much about this show was the casting, and I loved Alex's role. So I'm trying to think how Scott would have been because I love Scott as a performer too, but I can't even think of it because you really hit it, Alex. And the tough part about your role, I think, also is that the guy you had to play against, this guy who was your father, wasn't half bad either. I thought he did a pretty good job, didn't he, as your father?
Oh, I think so. I think he did a great job. I think it is really easy to relate to, and it's one of those things where it's like sometimes there are difficult relationships and families and things like that. So you can draw from that and play into it. And it was all about the rehearsal process of like, okay, which reaction is going to fit best for this production? Because it's like there's certain things that uh Steve's character says that I would be like that could either really upset me, as like I could think about even back to being a teenager arguing with my dad, but or it's like, okay, how do you play it, or how do you are you used to it? Are you used to this conversation? How do you react to that if like you've heard it all before, over and over? And what are families really like? And bringing that dynamic, I think one of the most influential things working with Steve, he told us a story of how there used to be impersonations of Steve Samuels over at the Magnetic. There'd be a contest, and
Yes, there was
I
a
was
Steve
thinking
off once.
a Steve off, and I was just like, it just struck me. I was just like, well, of course that's basically what I'm doing in this show. It's not, and I'm not like trying like in the show. It's not something where he's trying to do. It's just something that naturally happens in families. You do the same reactions, you make the same faces, you laugh the same way, you have the same physicality. And so relating to that, just kind of tuning into that, I was just like, oh well, this will be great. I think Steve and I bring a lot of the same energy. We can, how we can react, how we can match up. It's just finding that same energy level and like sticking to it.
Question for
Alex
both
has
of you.
Alex put that very, very well. To get back to your question, Blaine, it would have been a very different feeling show with Scott. Of course, we were right there. We were ready to open. We were very close, and it is a question of energy in a way. Scott is a gentler, nicer person certainly than I am, and Alex and I do have a kind of crazy energy that we can bring to bear. But even with Scott, we were looking at ways of are there moments where we can sort of reflect each other? But he was just whereas when I attack my son, which I do a lot in this play, uh, Scott a little bit just took it. It was just, it was, it was a little sadder. Whereas Alex, was like, oh, I'm going to fight back, So truly a very, very different energy. But also, as Alex described it, I think we each, at various stages of the rehearsal process, started noticing the particular ways, little gestures, little vocal mannerisms, there's one moment in the show that I said, let's just do this exactly the same way, and it gets a nice laugh. But that really, it's a fascinating process. I mean, here I am. We are not related, but I think in the end, I think the audience can believe that we're related, if only because of these gestural and vocal mannerisms that we found in each other that we could recapitulate.
And I certainly felt that way. It definitely is father-son. But let me ask you this question, Alex, and I'll ask Stephen the same thing too. How difficult is it to be acting with somebody on stage with you who's also your director? Is that a difficult thing to be able to work with the actor and the director at the same time?
I This experience, I'll say no. I can imagine some other ones that may have been more difficult, but this for me was actually kind of smooth sailing in a way because Steve had developed a way where he would film our like once we were like ready to go, he'd film our like tech dress rehearsals for like the last week or two, and he would like so he could totally tune in as an actor and then later watch the tape and then take notes, even for himself, and then send it out to everybody or discuss it the next day and things like that. And from there, it's like two different sides of him. But he would that way he could commit fully when he's on stage, and then he could turn it on, like his put his director's hat on, and then come back with that. And then it's not like we weren't constantly stopping. Now there'd be certain things in a production where he would have to stop in the middle of rehearsal to be like, oh no, we have to fix this right now because whatever blocking or whatever the case
Usually,
may
yeah,
be,
usually
staging.
technical matters. Yeah.
Yeah. But when it
Making
came
sure
to
that the audience
acting,
could see people.
right, acting choices and things like that, or reactions or things like that, or seeing a bigger picture from farther away, all those notes as a director would come in later. And it was like, oh, okay. And and it was nice because it was like it just made it simpler. But he had mentioned that was kind of a new process for him or something that he'd been working on for a while that he finally felt good about. And I felt good with it too.
Yeah,
See,
it was something that I again, I had to do this back at the Ridiculous Theatrical Company because Charles Ludlam wrote, directed, and starred in the plays, and he
okay.
could never see them. And this is a while back. This is in the late '80s and mid to late '80s. And I had had a son, and I had gotten a video camera, and I started bringing it in. And at first, Charles was totally panicked about this. And then he realized it could be a tool for him to improve the show because much as I've directed a lot of shows without having the technology available that I've also been in, and there are, depending on who you are and depending on your kinesthetic sense, you can do it. But if you can get that outside perspective, you can refine more completely. I have worked this way in the past, but I'm usually not able to bring the camera in until performances. So there would be refinement in the course of a run. In this particular instance, I will admit that our rehearsal period, just because of when people were available, was a little chaotic, and we hadn't gotten to a place where recording the show would have been particularly valuable until what we call Hell Week in the theater. And then it became an absolutely fantastic tool because I did, in this process, as Alex has said, I had learned in the past, even directing myself in plays that someone else has written, like A God in the Waters by David Brendan Hopes, um, that I wasn't focusing on my acting so much as the directing until we got to showtime, and that wasn't helpful to me or the other actors. I mean, it worked out mercifully, but this time, by the time we got to a steady period of rehearsing, I had made the decision consciously that I was going to focus on my acting while we were doing our run-throughs and let the camera help me after the fact. But this brings me back to something else that Alex was talking about. As a director, I do not believe in fixing the show, in setting it and asking the actors never to change in the course of the run. That is something that is endemic in the professional theater, primarily because directors tend to leave their shows as soon as they open because they have to go on to their next job. And therefore, stage managers are responsible for maintaining the shows. And nobody wants to let the stage manager redirect this or that. So the shows tend to be fixed, and the actors try to do essentially the same thing each time, particularly in the world of developing new work. And when you're doing something as we do in Asheville, where there aren't millions of people around, we can't run a show for 6 months or 2 years. We have a very, very limited number of performances. And as anyone knows, most shows are in previews for weeks, if not months, so that they can be refined. The only chance we really have to refine a brand new script is in the course of the run. So I don't want to stop the creative process. Also, I think actors grow. I think, if you've ever been in the long run of a show, if you just try to stay the same every time, maybe you can keep it fresh for a tiny little while, but 30, 40, 50 performances in, you gotta have the room to find new this, new that, something that makes it fresh for you. So I particularly because I don't go away, says as the director, even when I'm not in the show, I attend all of the performances because I want the actors to keep looking and finding and discovering things. And as I always say to them, you can try anything once. And if it's good, I'll go, yeah, that's great. Let's keep going. And if it's like, I'll go, well, maybe don't do that again.
One thing nice about this show also is that it has a longer run than unfortunately some of the shows have now in Asheville area. It seems all of a sudden, I don't know if Alex, you're seeing this, but a lot of shows now are just having a 2 week run. They just 2 weeks, six performances. This one at least has what, a 3 week run, is it?
Yeah, 9 performances. We got
Okay.
six left.
And to talk a little bit about that, Steve, if folks want to see this, um, where do they get tickets and where is it?
Yeah,
All that good
we're
stuff.
doing the show. We're doing the show at the BB Theater downtown on Commerce Street. Lovely little black box theater. We're very, very fortunate that Susan and Giles Collard are friends of the company, and they've become our home. Um, so we're playing Thursday through Saturday evenings at 7:30 p.m. And you can get tickets by visiting thesublimetheater.org. Theater is spelled Theater in this case, thesublimetheater.org. And you can get tickets. And oh, we'd love to see you because, we can't do this by ourselves. We need to develop a dedicated audience that comes to see the shows, that's willing to take a risk, adventuresome people, because there's not much press attention of any sort to theater in this town. And again, that's one of the reasons that people will go to see something like Into the Woods, which of course is a tremendous show. But the main reason people go is they already know. They know they're going to like it. Our tickets are less expensive, but it's asking for your time. It's asking for you to take a chance. Now, Asheville is a crazy place in some ways, and I think there are people who want to take chances, and I hope they'll take a chance on us. So visit thesublimetheater.org and come see a pretty crazy play.
And in
It's
closing,
Unlike
also
anything you're likely to have seen before. Blaine, I'm really interested. This is the first time we've done one of these interviews where you've already seen the
right.
play. What's that like for you? And what
Well,
did you think? I'll
I
take
was
the
going
risk.
to,
What
I
did
was
you
going
really
to ask
think?
Alex a spinner on that question, but my opinion was one of the things I love about seeing stuff that you do, Steve, is I haven't seen it elsewhere. So like this weekend, I saw Into the Woods, I had seen it. This show I had never seen, and I'm so glad you mentioned the old film because now it all ties together. I see the similarity. Um, I love a show, and I love this one, first of all, because anything you do, I love the casting, even though the father was, as Alex said, not bad. He has potential, but it was just such a fun, it was a crazy play. And then the woman, her name is
Laura
Laura, just
playing the title role.
yeah, but just completely surprised me, and how that role just took off, and it was so much fun to watch. So even though it's some dramatic aspects to it, it's a fun play, it's just kind of fun to watch, and to watch Alex go hyper. Oh, it's just I loved watching you, Alex, and I hadn't seen you in quite that role before, and so it's just if you want to see something different, have some fun with it, and not the same old. It's good to see this. That's again what the history of magnetic. I was always
There's a lot.
guaranteed seeing something different. Very rarely did I know what I was going to see. And this in particular, it was fun not having knowledge of it beforehand because that was a delight in seeing it. So I encourage people, but I was going to ask Alex that question. Who do you think should see this play, Alex?
I think everyone should see this play.
Well,
I
first of
mean,
all,
it's
age limit, what would you say? Is there an age limit?
um I don't know. I'm trying to think what I feel like there's only like one curse word at the top,
Right.
like in the middle of the show, so probably like 10 and up should be fine. Like I don't see
We
any issues.
I was very surprised. We've had several young teens come to see the show, and I had no idea how they would react, and they got such a kick out of it.
What did they?
I was stunned, amazed, and delighted because, of course, I'd love to reach everybody, and it's been remarkable that this play in particular has attracted a very broad age range, and what a pleasure that is. I will say There are goofy sexual references and little moments that So certainly, if we were looking at any younger people, you'd want them to be a little bit sophisticated. You don't
Oh
want
yeah.
somebody who's going to go,
Yeah,
you don't want,
it'd
and
probably be a
but it's not that big a deal.
PG-13, if you will.
I would say
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that
that
would be
sounds right. I
true,
think
and
Porky's is worse.
it could also be
American
appropriate.
Pie is worse.
Oh yeah.
It could also be appropriate for guys 75 and older. You think? Can you imagine?
I would hope so. I mean, I think I'm addressing our generation a little bit.
And
I had a friend in the house the other day. I'm only 71. He's 75, and the character I'm playing is 75. And he went, "Well, I wonder who you were thinking about."
well, my line when you said that, Stephen is playing 75, and so I'm 75, and I tell people, Stephen, I'm 75, but a young 75. Most people can't believe I'm a day older than 74. So
Right, right.
that's sort of your role. Let me ask you
Yeah,
both
yeah. Nobody can believe that I'm not just 70.
a final question. In terms of after this run, do you have anything else you can share with the public, Alex, as to what you're going to be doing the rest of the summer?
I hope you will, Alex.
Yes, actually, I have my one-man show is going up at Hart in the Fangmeyer, September 18th through the 21st. I received a grant from the North Carolina Arts
Pretty
Council
cool.
and Haywood Arts Council to produce it this year. And I applied last year because I performed a shorter version of it at Different Strokes Performing Arts Collective 369 Play Festival. Stephanie Hickling Beckman had asked me to write a piece basically about my life in regards to things I would talk about the year before at the first 369 festival in the talkbacks. There were stories I would tell there with the audience and we would relate. And she was like, "You need to do more of that. Do you think you can write something about that for this year's 369?" And last year I was like, "Sure, why not?" And at first, I just thought it was like a personal, like, this is just my story. This is where my name comes from. This is why, and this is my family, and this is how I got to where I'm at, and how I've experienced reactions to my ethnicity. The title of the piece is called Ethnically Ambiguous. And which is a term in theater and film about actors who can play multiple ethnicities. But in terms of film, it's so they don't have to cast specific ethnicities. They can cast people who look like they could be this or they could be that, and it covers a wide range. And that's so it's now going to be, yeah, that'll be September 18th to the 21st in the Fangmeyer. Um, and that's what I'm working on this summer about refining that, adding to it. There's a lot that's happened in the past year in terms of what we've been through with an election, with reactions to how it feels to have a bit more melanin in your skin and what that could mean as you travel, what that could mean in your community, and how communities are coming together to react to those things. Things that I touched on last year when I did a 45-minute version, and now we're getting to 120, an hour 20, hour 30. It's like, okay, what's going to happen next, and how are we reacting to these things? And there's just kind of more to delve in, especially as I talk to my family about it, who are basically the biggest piece of the puzzle in that one man show. Of like, I play different family members. I talk about my life and the reactions from people, either in the theater or just in life in general. But it had a great reception at 369, and I was very, very thankful for that. I didn't expect it. I I didn't know what to expect, and the reaction I got was huge. And I had a lot of people reach out to be like, "Can we do it? Can we work on it? Or you need to apply for this, you need to apply for that." There's grants and things like that. Even people who had been connected to other people who are on certain boards and things like that. It's like, yeah, this is something that we look for stories that people need to hear. So you need to get out there and keep telling it. And I said, oh,
Well,
okay.
let me know, Alex, and please, we'll do a show again in August. Talk about the show at heart. I'd love to have you on the show
Yeah,
again. And
sure.
If I may say, Alex has described it beautifully. I was lucky enough to see it, and it is one of the most wondrous one-man shows I have ever encountered. And I'm utterly thrilled that he's expanding it, and I can't wait to see it again. And I really, really urge people to come see his show. He's magnificent.
And same question, Steve, if you can share anything you're working on or coming up
Yeah,
after the run.
yeah. Our the next show from the Sublime is in the fall. It's a two one acts by Travis Lowe. Uh, their reactions to recent disasters, environmental disasters in the United States. One, of course, was a direct reaction to miserable Hurricane Helene here. It's called Sitting Up with the Dead. It's a one-person show that will star Erin McCarson, that I'm directing, and that's the main one act, and it's really beautiful and funny and strange, and I hope people won't be afraid to revisit the territory slightly, because Travis is always so funny the way he approaches things, and this is a beautiful meditation on some of what happened. And then there's a curtain raiser that our good friend Dakota Mann is directing, that is a little bit about the wildfires in LA. But again, both so full of humor, so again, using comedy to make it possible to think about difficult things, and to share them communally as we do in the theater. And then in the spring, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to introduce a new playwright. Her name is Kate McGonigal. She came to see a show and said, "Hey, I'm a playwright." And my God, this is a real writer, and this show is called Woman Other, not Other Woman, but Woman Other. And we're about to have a little reading for it, and we're working on putting the production together. And again, I hope that will go up in the spring. We also may be doing another couple of one acts by Travis Lowe around Valentine's Day, so that we can get his acerbic take on love.
Well, anyway, looking forward to it, especially Stephen. I remember the last one act plays you did. You wanted to you combine two shows with it. You were in one and Scott was in the other one. It was a couple of years ago. It was one act plays Krupp's tapes.
Oh. Well, those were not original plays. I'm
Right, no,
sorry, I got
but
confused for a moment. Yes, every once in a while we revisit classics for several reasons. One, of course, is we hope that audiences who are going to come to our new works will have some idea of the history, where they come from, the works that may have inspired them. Also, I find, at least personally, that I am often inspired by being inside of a great playwright's work that will then have a tremendous impact on something I'll write next. For example, I was lucky enough for the Montfort Park Players a number of years ago to direct and act in Tartuffe, a play by the great Moliere. And that had a tremendous impact on my writing a play called The Merchant of Asheville.
okay.
So that's just an example. But yes, sometimes, one act plays can be a bit of a tough sell. We did well with those because, again, some people knew about those plays. What I try to do now when I'm doing an evening of one acts, which we don't do very often, is that they'll be at least thematically related, so that there's that much for the audience to hold on to it in the shape of an evening.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you, Stephen Samuels, for being my guest, along with Alex McDonald Villarreal. I think I have it. And
There you go.
look forward to seeing you in lots of stuff in the future. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and we'll see you guys hopefully sometime in the near future. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Blaine. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Blaine.